That's right, everyone. We are back in my college apartment, and with that, we are on to a new video series. So if you recall from the beginning of my previous semester, the first video that I uploaded was a spoiler for the original Star Wars movie to build up for Star Wars The Force Awakens. And because I had as much fun as I did doing that, I figured with Captain America Civil War coming in May, I figured I would do a new video series, this one for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know, you're all probably thinking, why don't you just do a video for the first two Captain America movies? You know, make your life a little bit easier. Because I see Civil War as not just simply a Captain America movie. This movie is going to incorporate a lot of the Marvel heroes from each of the previous Marvel Cinematic movies, so I feel it would only make sense if I talked about every single one of them, since they all, whether directly or indirectly, do lead to this one. In other words, I'm going to talk about them all because I want to and because it's fun. So let's kick it off with the movie that started the MCU, and that is Iron Man. So Iron Man came out in 2008, so wow, almost 10 years ago now. I guess that's what it's like to feel old right there. And this was the movie that was going to more or less decide the fate of the MCU. Because if this movie turned out awesome, then Marvel could see that it truly could lead into something more. On the other hand, if it sucked, then they'd pretty much just have to scrap everything right then and right there. Thankfully, however, Iron Man turned out really awesome. So let's talk about why. So towards the beginning of this movie, we get a brief glimpse at the character of Tony Stark, played by Robert Downey Jr. And this guy just basically lives the greatest life you could ever live. I mean, it shows him at an award ceremony. He's being nominated for something like the most brilliant inventor, mechanic, weapons dealer in the world. Something like that anyway. And he's just somewhere else entirely in a casino gambling away millions of dollars because that's nothing to him. And later on that night, he sleeps with this scalding hot news reporter that he met like 5 seconds ago in easily the greatest mansion built in the history of the world. You just see all of what he has going for him, and it leaves you sitting there like, this guy has the greatest life ever. But then the following day gets here, and Tony has to go to Afghanistan with his military friend Rhodey to give a new weapons demonstration. And the weapon is basically a kill-everything-in-sight missile that creates a giant sonic boom. Which basically means the USA now wins every war for the rest of mankind. So everything goes great. It looks like, it's just going to be another day at the office for Tony Stark. Until his military convoy just gets blown up and ambushed out of nowhere, which we got a brief glimpse of at the very beginning of this movie. A lot of the soldiers are killed, and Tony takes a bad hit to the chest, which eventually leads to the terrorists abducting him. He wakes up later on in some cave with an electromagnet in his chest that was placed there by his fellow captive Yinsen. Yinsen explains that there's a huge chunk of shrapnel in his chest that's trying to crawl its way into Tony's heart, which will eventually kill him. And the electromagnet in his chest is what's stopping that from happening. Then not long after, the group of terrorists, they come in, they're known as the Ten Rings, and they are somehow armed with Tony Stark's weaponry. But there's one weapon they want in particular, and that is the Jericho missile that Tony gave the presentation for earlier. Tony appears to agree to build it for them, so they'll let him go, but he has other intentions. He instead spends his time with Yinsen in building a miniature arc reactor to further protect and run his heart. But this arc reactor has another purpose to it, and that is to power an armored suit that Tony is going to build so that he and Yinsen can break free of this. Now this is probably what most people will agree to be the best all-around scene of the movie, because it's here that we truly see what makes Tony Stark a superhero. It's not the Iron Man suit that is Tony's superpower, it's Tony's genius that is his superpower. I mean, you see him in this cave with nothing but a pile of scrap metal, and he's somehow able to build an arc reactor that can power his heart, and also a suit of armor and weaponry. That is awesome, and it's what makes Tony Stark a badass. Now the two of them have made all the progress they can, and it's time to get the hell out of there. However, the terrorists begin to realize that these two are definitely up to something. They try to get to the two of them, but Tony still needs time to power up the suit, so Yinsen goes to sacrifice himself so that Tony can do that. But now that the suit is powered up, Tony starts making his way through the terrorist base. He's killing a majority of them. He destroys all of the weaponry that they stole, and then he escapes via jetpack. Unfortunately, his suit is destroyed in the process, but luckily, he's eventually found and rescued by Rhodey. He gets back to the US, where he's greeted by his associate Pepper, aka the only person who can really put up with him. He calls for an immediate press conference where he announces that he is officially shutting down the weapons industry of his company because of the danger that he has now seen that it can bring to people. And then here's where we continue to see how much of a genius Tony Stark is. Because now he's trying to find different ways in which he can further upgrade his suit. You know, he's testing out ways for it to sustain flight, be able to fly at very high altitudes, and even add some weaponry to it. I mean, it makes for some really cool scenes, it makes for some very funny moments in him trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And it also just shows what he's capable of making when he's working in his home instead of in a cave. And once he's had it perfected, he's noticed on TV that the terrorist group that captured him is now terrorizing the village Gomera. And Tony decides to do the best thing for this type of situation. Just fly down there and just waste these motherfuckers. And yeah, he just storms in there, he takes out every single one of them, and he's even able to elude a bunch of these F-22 Raptors that Rhodey sent after him because he had no idea what the hell he was. But what I loved in particular about the scene where Tony saves the village is I think that scene is the perfect representation of what great character development is. Because earlier in this movie, Tony Stark was completely carefree, you know, all he really wanted was just to live the best life that he could live and have a good old time. To now becoming a guy who absolutely cares and will go out of his way to protect and help the people in need. He essentially didn't start out as necessarily a superhero, he became one as the movie went on, and I feel that added so much to it. But every superhero needs a supervillain, and we find out later on in this movie that that supervillain is none other than Obadiah Stane. That's right, Tony's business partner is the one who intended for the Ten Rings to kill him and has also been supplying them with Tony Stark's weaponry. With that, he goes back to the terrorists, he takes the remains of the original Iron Man armor to make his own Ironmonger suit. So now he intends to kill Pepper for trying to turn him in, then kill Tony, and then eventually take Stark Industries as his own company again. Luckily though, Tony still has his Iron Man suit. He goes to confront Obadiah, and now we get a clash of the robot titans. The fight between the two is intense, it looks awesome, and it's really cool seeing just what each suit is capable of doing. And because Tony's suit is running out of power because he had to rely on the backup arc reactor, it does leave you at a point feeling like Tony could in fact die from this fight. The mistake that a lot of superhero and a lot of action movies in general make is that they don't let us feel like the main protagonist in the movie is in very real peril at certain points, like they could actually be killed off in this movie. Iron Man does in fact make you feel that way at certain points, and that's what makes it so much more intense. Eventually though, Tony does have Pepper overload the main arc reactor of Stark Industry, which unleashes a massive shockwave that destroys the Ironmonger suit and kills Obadiah. The final scene of the movie shows Tony Stark at a new press conference, apparently prepared to give a backup story to what actually happened, but he decides to completely discard it, and he breaks the #1 rule that every superhero should not break, and he says to everyone, "I am Iron Man." However, before the film can officially end, we get what is probably the greatest post-credit scene in the history of movies. One of, for sure. Tony comes home, he sees someone in the shadows telling him that he is not the only superhero in the world. He then shows himself as the director of the Organization of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson. And then he says to him the words, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative." And at that moment, every movie fan and comic book fan just completely wet their pants. Because everyone now knew what was officially on the way for us. So all in all, Iron Man is an awesome movie. Robert Downey Jr., he completely owns the role of Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. I mean, you watch this movie and you think to yourself, there's no one else who could really play this role as well. And that's something you always look for in movies like this. Everyone else in this movie did a great job. It had good side characters, it had a good villain. The story is great, the humor is awesome, the character development is amazing. The action is awesome, the special effects are really cool to see. It was the movie that officially kickstarted the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it still stands, arguably to this day, as the best standalone Marvel movie. I say arguably because I still go back and forth a little bit between this movie and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Point being, this movie is an awesome movie by itself, and it only leads to so much more awesomeness along the way. So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. And I want to give another huge thank you to fellow YouTuber Chris Smith. He recently gave me a shout out in one of his videos to try to bring some new people over to my channel. That was really nice of him. So please help me say thank you by subscribing to his channel. I put the link below in the description. He does very similar things that I do, you know, movie reviews, movie news, all that good stuff. He's very smart and very passionate when it comes to movies, and I think you'd really like what he's doing over there. So go check him out. And also, don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.